Welcome back to Where You Live with Gene and Tony. We're broadcasting from the Concierge Landscape Studios. We're brought to you this hour by Extreme Exteriors. And it's great to have you with us today. If you are just tuning in, we're talking about a story that came out of the Gotham Gazette from New York just this last week. And it states that there is a legal battle claiming discrimination all centered around an air conditioner, a wall unit that a family wanted to put in, or a gentleman they did put in for their mother and father. Apparently the mother had bad allergies, asthma. Air conditioning certainly does seem to help prevent and cut down on the allergens that are in the air that a person has to breathe. But the fact of the matter is they already had central air conditioning in the entire property. So why was there a need again? And of course, these people ramp things up right away. As you mentioned, Tony, there was no discussion, was there, at all about whether this could be done with permission?
Well, and I don't know that the question is. I disagree with you a little bit. I don't think the question is why isn't the central air adequate enough. I don't think that's the grounds for this dispute at all. The grounds for the dispute is they did not request permission from the co-op in advance to do this, which their documents require. And once they did it, they couched it in the terms of a discrimination lawsuit, and there was no evidence that the co-op took any discriminatory action.
Exactly. The judge said, I don't find any substantial harm or that was done to the building, but the fact of the matter is an association needs to follow through with something like this. Just because in the case of the Feldmans there was no substantial damage because someone did something on their own, does that mean that you allow the next person to do the same? And I would say that there'd be discrimination if if the association let this go and then tried to pursue someone else later.
And then try to enforce the rules with someone else. That's right. Then you're on shaky ground. What's interesting is the ultimate decision here is exactly what it should be if someone had requested a reasonable accommodation for a disability. And that is, the Feldmans, ultimately the courts decided were allowed to keep the air conditioning unit, but for as long as they live there. But when they sell and move, they have to restore the apartment to its original condition. Now, that's the same kind of terms that federal fair housing requires for a disability issue. The problem is the Feldmans never requested a reasonable accommodation. They never started the question that way. They just did it after the fact.
The association was never given the opportunity.
That's right.
To deal with this.
Right.
And to me, that is one of the biggest problems that I have hearing a story like this. And that is, was that right? Was that the right thing to do, to just go ahead and automatically ramp it up and claim discrimination? One of the things that I just can't stand seeing today are people who are so quick to want to just label and demonize someone else. They never want to talk about whether or not there are issues on both sides. Nobody wants to deal with mutually collaborating in working
to
together
find a reasonable solution.
Yes, and come to some kind of agreement. But instead, let's just label the association as bigots, as being discriminatory, and make them awful people. And I've said this before. To me, it's kind of like the boy crying wolf. If people, to me, in the discourse that we hear of discrimination in all of the cases that we've been hearing, continue to get pushed more and more and more. It's like the story of the boy who cried wolf. After a while, I think that all of these efforts by people are going to indeed have less credibility.
Well, they'll be less meaningful.
Less meaningful, exactly.
Is this situation the same as turning someone away from renting an apartment or buying an apartment because of their race, religion, culture, ethnicity? isn't that more serious than this question of whether or not someone broke their co-op rules by not following the process?
Yeah.
It's crazy to equate this situation with the more serious instances of discrimination that might occur.
And the other thing is, it's not really about air conditioning. Here was a family who said, we're going to put a hole through a brick wall where no hole exists. We're going to do it on our own.
Yeah.
Do they know that there's any electrical wiring behind there? Any plumbing?
Point.
Do they know that there's anything else that they would be damaging to that co-op building?
Good point.
No, they just went ahead and did it.
Which is why the co-op has rules about it.
And that's why they do. Exactly.
It's because they don't want you damaging the property that's owned by the entire group.
So is this really about air conditioning?
Yeah.
I don't see it that way.
It's so common where I'm going to play the victim. I'm going to be the victim of your demonic ways, and I will get more sympathy, and then I will get my way in the end.
Yeah. There's a couple other things I want to bring up here. What's interesting here, let's talk about this again. Here's something else. The judge in this case, his name was Justice Martin Schulman of the Queen's Supreme Court, agreed. He said a couple things. He said he didn't see any evidence that there was substantial damage to the building or other residents. And he goes on to say that while the building does have cooling units, those units do not provide the filtration provided by the air conditioner and are not in use all year round. So they were saying the judge was saying, well, AC wasn't being used all year round, so that was a problem for the Feldmans. I want to ask you, we're talking about New York. Since when has AC units been turned on all year round?
Well, again, Gene, I don't think there's anything wrong with what he said. If that's what's needed for this woman's medical condition, then that's what's needed.
But that is a point, because you know what happens if the weather gets under 60, 55 degrees and you have an AC unit, it does not work, ladies and gentlemen. It freezes up.
Well, that's a good point.
It does not work.
You can't.
It can't cool frozen air.
So that's a very good point.
And
we're not talking about cooling. We're talking about filtering the air, right? But it's not going to operate if the temperatures are too low.
That's right. It's not going to be
funny.
pushing.
You're right. What about some other type of air filtration system just within the unit?
And that to me brings us back to the discussion where it should be. Had the Feldman said, we're concerned about the air quality in our parents' unit, and let's talk about what we can do to filter the air, I think the board would have been happy to work with it. Could that mean that things in the central unit that does the heating and AC, maybe there's some other hypoallergenic filters that could be put on? Maybe there's some things that can be done at the unit without putting a hole through the wall.
You mentioned this when we were preparing for the show. There are air conditioning units that do not go through the wall or through a window.
We had the same thing happen. There was a concern property that we manage. It's old mansions that have been restored. Beautiful. They go 3 stories. They have an AC unit, central air conditioning unit put in. And I'm sure the AC doesn't push up on the third floor the same as the other floors. So someone asked this. In this case, they came to the board and they asked for permission.
The process.
Exactly. Yeah. And the board said, you know what? We've heard that there's an AC unit that's a standalone that goes in a unit for cooling. And it doesn't even have to protrude through any window or any hole in the wall. And the person said, I didn't know that.
Yep.
Things were resolved and everybody got what they wanted.
Without damaging the exterior of the building. Yeah.
And so, folks, if you're in an association, it would seem to me that you would at least give that same opportunity. But no, what we have here is someone who wants to just ramp it up and claim discrimination. And to me, that is just totally unfair.
And it's inappropriate. I'd like to hear from our listeners. If anyone has questions or comments about this story or anything we talk about on the show, call our hotline at 952-224-2668 and leave us your comment.
Yeah, so you'll be leaving a message, folks, on that hotline. During the week, we record on Wednesdays, and this airs on Sunday. So we will take any comments that you have and read them on the air, or have you join us for a few minutes, too, for a future taping of the show. And that number, one more time, Tony?
Is 952-224-2668.
That's the Where You Live hotline. Well, I tell you what, let's take another break. When we come back, we're going to be talking to our good friend Dan Greenstein, attorney with Burnett Clifson, as we deal with our next story. A funny thing happened on the way to the meeting. Back after this.